Well, if you've looked at that list, you get to Idaho, keep going down, and you'll get to Idaho. Or if you get to Ohio, you'll keep going down, you get to Idaho. But I did make a commitment, and next year it won't be that low. Okay, yeah. First, I need to indicate that I'm here and expressing my personal views and not expressing any views of the Idaho Public Utilities Commission, the commissioners, or any of the state officials in that capacity. I want to talk a little bit about a process that we went through that will give you an idea of what we want. About a year ago, we began to meet at a NAPSR level, which is the state program managers, to look at what we could do in terms of the Reauthorization Act that was going to be coming up and going to be considered. NAPSR has no ability to fund any of its activities on its own, and it receives its funding through a grant from PHMSA. And it's not appropriate that we would be using government money to lobby on that behalf. And so we determined that it wouldn't be appropriate for NAPSR to enter into any kind of lobbying efforts. We partnered then with NARUC, who is the National Association of Commissioners, who has several committees. One committee is Committee on Gas, and there is a subcommittee on pipeline safety that comes out of NARUC, and that really, the benefit for that needs to go to Colette Honorable, current FERC commissioner. But she saw the vision there and decided that pipeline safety needed to have a greater exposure and greater view before the regulatory utility commissioners. So we went through NARUC and through their subcommittee for pipeline safety and developed a list of things that we wanted to be addressed in the Reauthorization Act. And to, let's see, that is way, there we are. And they had resources that allowed us to do that. They had some lobbying capacity. Additionally, with the ability to access commissioners, we were then able to access federal representatives from the states, and actually this was the first time that state regulators got involved in this process. So it was a substantial learning process and learning and growth experience for us. There was some good and some bad in all of that. The bill was signed by the president and in June of this year. These are the 10 things that, and it's actually appropriate to say the NARUC issues, but NAPSR was involved in the development of those. The first 4 were funding issues, and they probably don't mean a lot to many of you in terms of how we were receiving money through PHMSA. This next 2 related to the one-call grants. PHMSA receives money for one-call grants. These are monies that comes to organizations through the states and are used to develop damage and enhance damage prevention activities in the state. And the last 4 dealt with an increase in jurisdiction for state regulators. And some of these do have an interest for you. We'll talk specifically. We developed 4 major priorities. One was gathering line jurisdiction. We wanted to look at expanding jurisdiction into the gathering lines. And there is activity happening on that. We looked at odorization of all transmission pipelines, currently unodorized. We wanted interstate agency agreements for the states. The way it is currently set up is states do the intrastate activity, inspection activity, and PHMSA generally does the interstate activity. Some states have entered into agency agreements to where the state inspectors do both the inter and the intrastate activity. We wanted that to continue and to expand, and that's a developing area. And we'll talk a little bit more. And we eliminate or change the maintenance of effort requirement. This was part of the funding thing. There were rules that we had to, on a state level, that had to go through that affected our funding. And we wanted that formula changed, and that's what that one really relates to. When we look at the progress that we made, the total funding for states appears to be the same in the bill. The problem with that, and that's total funding, the problem with that is there's additional mandates and additional requirements that are going to come down upon the states. And so when you do the percentage of how much of the state programs are funded by PHMSA, the percentage is going to get smaller. What they fund us at, it may stay the same. The level of funding may stay the same, but the amount that we spend, or the denominator in that percentage, gets higher. And so we're concerned about that. We don't know where that's going and how much of a decrease that's going to be. And that decrease has to be made up at a state level by state legislatures. Some state legislatures aren't as interested in pipeline safety as other state legislatures. And so the funding may or may not be there. If the funding's not there, then you're going to see a decrease in the ability of the state programs to do what they need to do. The law or the Reauthorization Act set up a study to determine the feasibility and the cost and benefits of odorization. We think that's a great outcome. There wasn't odorization a requirement, but this is one of the things we learned. We sprang that on everybody. Industry didn't know about it. Environmental groups didn't know about it. We just brought that out. I'm not sure that was the best way to do that. Okay? But because frankly, state regulators have one perspective on that issue, and that issue needs to be considered. Okay? So we're pleased with that outcome. The involvement of the states in the interstate inspections is acceptable, and we look forward to seeing the coordination between PHMSA and the state inspectors on interstate increase, even if it's in a matter of a training and shadowing and mentoring type of situation. But we also indicated that the few states that do have the intrastate agency status will be able to maintain that. The 3-year averaging provision in the formula for the maintenance effort was done away with, and so we felt like that was a win for us. And language in this act supports states' continued involvement in the participation on these technical committees. The issue there really is they have all these technical committees that are out there that industry and government get together. States programs generally don't have funding to send their people to those on state dollars. And so in the past, PHMSA has allocated monies so that individuals from state programs can be involved, and that is going to be continued, so that the states will have a continued input into those technical committees that look forward to issues. Some of the lessons we learned are, in the past, we have never been consulted. When I say we, state regulators haven't been consulted or invited to the table when reauthorization acts were considered. We just kind of figured that, well, we didn't make ourselves known, and so we weren't asked. So we were now at the table. And we want to continue to be a part of the discussion. As one fellow described it, it says, felt like we went from the kids' table to the grown-up table at Thanksgiving dinner. We need to be proactive in advocating the state program perspective. This is one way. We appreciate this opportunity. We need to be out there and let people know state programs are very important. As Pete had indicated, we do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the work. And so we want to be involved. And we need to be proactive in speaking to perspective or to other stakeholders. We need to be involved with PHMSA in advance, with industry, and with public interest groups, way before the next reauthorization act. There ought to be, I guess, we don't want to go in and surprise industry or PHMSA or public interest with positions that are, they don't know anything about, that state programs may have. And so that requires effort in advance. Additionally, this gives us, the current landscape gives everybody some opportunities in this area. For instance, with PHMSA's evaluation of the damage prevention laws on the states are going to have to go through some changes. Those that are deemed inadequate are going to have to make some choices. The legislatures are going to have to make some choices. And it would be good to have the interested parties in those damage prevention laws help educate the legislators. We just went through a 3-year process in Idaho to change our damage prevention law. And I was naive enough to believe that if you ask a legislator, do you think there ought to be safe digging, and he said yes, that he would be willing to support a damage prevention law. But that's not the case, okay? And 3 years we worked. The first year, it was that we didn't even want to propose legislation. Second year, we proposed it and withdrew it voluntarily because it was going to get killed, and we didn't want that bloody mess to have to work through again. And finally, the third year, we worked with enough groups to where we were able to come with a consensus for the legislature. And then there's a whole new area out there, and that is with the new things that are coming down, the new requirements on the operators are going to cost some money, some capital, that are going to show up in rate cases. And if there isn't somebody there advocating pipeline safety, advocating that the company is a reasonable investment and prudent investment, companies are going to have those things kicked out of their rates. And that ought not to be the case. So with that, I thank you for your time.